songs remind me of Montana. The way the air felt in that place. The cool breeze in the morning and the way we felt alive. Filled with sun and space. All those months that we were out wandering, yet always knowing just where we'd go. We took a minute there in Montana to feel the summer breeze and winter snow. There are always mornings that I wonder what it would be like to have stayed there, riding through the town on spokes with treasures that we found, feeding dogs and cutting hay. All those months that we were out wandering, yet always knowing just where we'd go. We took a minute there in Montana to feel the summer breeze and winter snow. It's been years since we were out there wandering, since we got into that car and flew away. But there will always be a certain part inside of me, driving through Montana in early May. All those months that we were out wandering, yet always knowing just where we'd go. We took a minute there in Montana to feel the summer breeze and winter snow. When I close my eyes, it's where I go. Just you and me, the summer breeze, an open road.
Spread my wings and we I'm Daisy Ridley. I'm Nancy Mongeon.
I'm Kara Swisher, emotionally unavailable best-selling author.
I'm Scott Galloway. This is South by Southwest.
Funniest man in the world, Conan O'Brien. Hey, enough! No more pictures.
That's it. We're people.
Stop it.
I'm just walking around Austin, talking to people. I can see in their eyes, we have fun, we're improvising, and then I see the lights go out of their eyes, and they're like, I have to go, Conan.
It's the most receptive, amazing audience.
The audiences are very lovely here. It's a really wonderful film to watch as a group.
To coalesce as one group and put their differences aside and do something together for the good of the entire human civilization.
Civilization is built on togetherness. We need to change the dream of the modern world to a culture of true belonging.
The community here really gives me a sense of belonging.
Here to be part of this experience, this organic thing that we are doing together right now.
We're mammals, we're meant to be together.
All of us coming together and wanting to see the world progress towards a better place.
Anyone in this room who is a part of an organization using the power of story to transform our society, we will win, y'all.
All right, good morning, good morning, good morning. Thank you guys so much for being out here in this beautiful daylight savings time first day. I am Z, like the letter. I've had the great pleasure of organizing this session, the other sessions happening in this room this weekend. I want to thank our sponsor, Advanced Technology International, ATI. They're not only sponsoring this panel, but everything that happened yesterday, everything that's happening later today in this room. We've got a happy hour happening also at 5 to 6 p.m. tonight with a program called the Defense Business Accelerator, looking at leveraging commercial markets to really grow companies. And that's what we're here to talk about on this particular panel, building for growth, moving from startup to market dominator. So please join me in welcoming Allison and her fantastic panelists up onto the stage.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Z, and thank you to ATI and South by Southwest for hosting us this morning. We are just delighted to be here having this conversation with you all about building for growth and what it takes for a startup in its earliest days to be thinking about the long term. And by thinking about how at this very early, very pivotal point in its lifetime, it can be making decisions that set it up for success in a range of different areas later in its lifetime. So we'll dig into the content in a minute. First, let's introduce our esteemed group of panelists, starting with myself. I'm Allison Rhines. I am the site head for JLABS at Texas Medical Center. We are J&J's strategic incubator. Let me introduce the rest of the panelists, starting with Beth to my right. Please introduce yourselves with your name, title, and the scope of your role and what you're currently doing.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Beth McKeon. I'm based in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I'm here kind of wearing two hats, both representing my company, Fluent, where we have a data technology that measures early stage product market fit and business model of risk for investors, accelerators, economic development organizations across the country, and also just recently joined an organization, a nonprofit in Cambridge called Ignite VC to lead and build up infrastructure to help increase diversity in the funding pathways for biotech companies.
Hi, I'm Nick Paine. I am the CTO and co-founder of a local Austin company here called Apptronik. We are building general purpose humanoid robots to help address the prevalent labor shortage issues that we're facing as a world.
And good morning, I'm Julia Martin. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for ATI, or your sponsor for today. And who are we? We are a nonprofit, large nonprofit corporation and a consortium manager. And what do those words mean? We are about facilitating solutions among government and industry. So we try to provide value in the acquisition support for the government, help them to reach technology providers like many of you, and to really solve their problems. How can they reach out and find people that are not the Boeings, the Lockheeds of the world, but that have relevant technologies that are going to solve their requirements and meet their requirements? So we're in the middle of that. We're trying to help the non-traditional companies meet with the government, understand the requirements, and figure out, is there a way that they can work together? It gives government access to those non-traditionals as well. So that's what we do.
Terrific. Well, as y'all can see, we have a diverse set of perspectives today. Some investors, some operators, and some folks who have a mix of experience on both sides. So to start off this debate, or this discussion, maybe it may become a debate, we'll see. We typically use the word incubator to describe a venue where startups can go in their earliest stages to be sort of protected from the broader environment and get the nurturing and support that they need. So this metaphor of, if you think of like a true sapling, the term incubator has become so commonly used that sometimes we don't actually think about what it really actually means literally. And so if you think about a small plant that needs to be protected from the broader environment, but at the same time is building itself to grow into a strong tree, but the decisions that are being made at this time where it's fighting for its survival and it's thinking day to day, how do I survive? This is the same time where there is an opportunity for pivots that down the line can have a huge impact on its success or not. And as a startup founder, in my role, I talk with startup founders all the time who are dealing with this question of how do I survive day to day, but at the same time, they are dealing with this incredible opportunity rather than a challenge to be able to make decisions with a huge impact down the line. So we're going to talk about this question from the perspective of both a startup operator and an investor as to how startups can be thinking about making these kinds of pivotal decisions across a range of different aspects of their business. So Beth, let me start with you. Speaking about Fluent, can you talk to us about best practices from an operator's perspective?
Yeah, I think it's a tricky thing to be a founder that has a giant vision and is motivated to build something that's really impactful, going to change the world, $1 billion opportunity, and we have to operate from that place because the work is so hard. Like the thing that's exciting is that opportunity, but at the same time we have to hold, with a lot of discipline, the reality that today there are a series of things that have to be focused on that are so risky, the unknowns are so risky, that not solving for those right now will potentially kill the business completely. And so it's about being able to hold the big vision, but also be laser focused on the right thing. And I think it's often the case that as founders, we can get so drawn into the pitch or the narrative or the future state that we kind of either allow the hard, risky things to go unaddressed at the stage that they need to be, or we just don't even notice what those are. And so I think being able to hold these two competing pieces of the business, the macro and the micro at the same time, are incredibly important.
Very interesting. Let's hear, Nick, from your perspective. Your career trajectory has been interwoven with the history of Apptronik. Can you tell us both about how your career has progressed and in parallel, how the business has thought about some of these types of decisions?
Sure. So my name is Nick, and I've really kind of taken on the technical side of our founding story. My co-founder was Jeff Cardenas. He's our CEO. And I was graduating from UT Austin with a PhD, and I was really not focused on becoming an entrepreneur. I kind of stumbled into it. Whereas my counterpart, Jeff, he always talks about how he grew up dreaming about being an entrepreneur. He really was inspired by people like Steve Jobs and others. And it was a fortuitous meeting between the two of us, but for me, it was really about focusing on the difficult problems of today and thinking about how they'll be solved tomorrow. So for me, I was focused on, how do I want to spend my next few years, choosing what grad school degree I'd go into and if I would pursue a PhD. And I really just looked at things that I was excited about, things that I was passionate about. And at the time, this was 10 or 15 years ago, there were some exciting things happening in robotics, but it was not nearly a widespread foregone conclusion that this would be a widespread useful thing in the world. And so for me, I just, again, followed sort of my intuition and curiosity and passions down this field. But for us, it was, I had the opportunity to work with NASA early on in my career. That was part of my PhD. And I also had the opportunity to work with several other organizations. And that was really exciting work that we wanted to take it from the lab and have it make an impact in the real world. So that was really sort of when I started thinking about crossing that chasm from academic research into a commercial endeavor. And for us, the idea of building robots that could go out and make a real impact in the world was a massive problem and a challenge. For us, we took on a lot of non-dilutive capital to make that a reality, not be pressured too quickly into market, but really kind of testing our ability to go and create the technology and underlying foundations of that. More recently, we've expanded our VC funding, and we've really become focused on the product that we're delivering. But that transition from non-dilutive capital into dilutive capital is kind of the key thing for us.
Terrific. Well, let's bookmark that because we're going to talk about different types of capital later in the discussion. Julia, let's hear from you. You have a broad view into many different types of companies in your role, sort of a macro perspective. Can you talk to us about best practices that you've seen from interacting with different companies?
Yeah, you know, we were obviously talked beforehand, and I've given this some thought because when you think about successful startups and what makes them successful, what differentiates them from others that sort of, turn into the zombies that you hear about. And it is, you meet entrepreneurs and what do they want to talk about? They want to talk about their technology, right? What's exciting, the problem that they're trying to solve, the good that they're trying to do in the world, how they're going to improve and disrupt, current practices. And I would just encourage folks to also, while you're resolving your technical risk, also be thinking about the business side, right? Obviously, that's my background, but think about market entry strategy, like who's going to buy it, right? And realize that there is a market economy that already exists. There are processes that already exist. Do you know where you're going to go? The earlier panel was talking about the complexities of supply chain. Where are you in that pathway? Who are you selling to? How are they going to pay for what you want? Is there going to be a cost to that company to adopt your disruptive technology over what they've currently got? Are you going to be able to overcome their inertia with your value proposition? Those really be thinking about your business strategy and the risks around the business as well as the technology risk. We work with folks in the medical device space, right? And they're focused on how to get their right coding and approvals for the CMS, the CPT codes, and those kinds of things. But if you have a device, yes, it's got to get implanted or used by a patient, but is that really the regulatory pathway? You need other codes and approvals and other things to get a device because the hospital's got to buy the device as well as put it in, right? So the doctor can get reimbursed, but is somebody actually going to get paid for buying your device in that kind of space? And there's all kinds of regulatory pathways. So be thinking about that and surrounding yourself with folks that can help you with these business risks, right? Because the technology is fun and it's cool and it is disruptive. And I was thinking about the gentleman on the panel yesterday from Smart Cups who had a lot of opinions about, and his quotable quote was, we have this awesome thing that's going to solve a lot of problems in the world, but who gives a shit? So, unless you understand how to enter the market, right, and what you have to overcome when you come into the market. So I'll stop there, but there's a lot around the business side, and I just encourage you to surround yourself with folks who can advise you as you're developing your technology solution to also be thinking about what does that mean and how do I turn that into a commercializable business.
Interesting. I think your comments on the business side are super interesting because often we find startup founders thinking about long-term business strategy in not necessarily a truly interleaved way with funding strategy. So I want to pick up on your point, and we'll come back to funding strategy in a bit, but to thinking about the future of the business. So one area where I have seen startups get into trouble is in thinking about whether they're going to become a product business or a service business, going down business rat holes with different archetypes of what type of business they want to be. And the world, of course, has space for many different kinds of businesses. We all interact with many different kinds of businesses all the time. But one key factor that I've found in dealing with a broad range of startups is the need for a level of intentionality in deciding which ones of those things you want to be and really being purpose-driven about that. that. So we've talked a bit just now about the business and planning for long-term business success. Let me turn it over to Nick to speak about planning for long-term technical success. So what is the corollary of that when it comes to thinking about R&D strategy? And so imagine you have your product strategy in place and you're thinking about building for long-term technical success. What does that look like from the outset?
Yeah, that's been a fascinating journey from our perspective. So we set out to solve very ambitious problems that were, these are 10, 20-year types of problems, but you can't go to an investor or find a grant that funds you for that long. So you need to think about, how do I build towards that? And for us, we have been intentional, but we've also learned throughout the process, and we've tried something, and when we see it doesn't work, we try something else, and we change, and we react to the data that we're being presented with. And so for us, early on, we were primarily focused on building the foundational elements of our technology. We were less concerned about focus at that point in time, and we were really just looking for how do we fund the company, how do we build the kind of key foundational elements that we'll need 8 to 10 years from now. And so in that sense, we very much were more of a services company. The key thing being, due to our funding strategy, we really were focused on retaining our core IP. So that, I think, is at least as a technology company, a very important element of your strategy is thinking about your IP for the long term. But that was probably about 5 years of living off non-dilutive funding, SBIRs, commercial contracts, but being very intentional about retaining our intellectual property. And maybe having a sense of our North Star and trying to move in that direction, but if we had to veer off from there a little bit, that was okay because we were still primarily moving in the right direction. As we got further down, though, probably about 5 years into the company, we felt like our technology was mature enough that we were within the time window that a venture capitalist would need to have ROI. So typically, if you raise a Series C or A or B, you try to scope that so you have 18, 24 months to have a meaningful milestone. And at that point, we really kind of transitioned the company to be very product focused. We did not take on extraneous efforts that were deviating from that core thesis. And that's when we really thought about scaling. We really thought about very heavy understanding of the market, understanding of our customers, how we would enter that market. And that really kind of ramped up that product-focused activity.
Very interesting. So we've heard about building from a business perspective. We've heard about it from a technical and product perspective. Let's talk about it from a financing perspective. Beth, over to you. Let's talk about best practices for raising venture capital. When is venture capital appropriate? Do you have thoughts on other types of, let's say venture capital for a moment, because we're going to come back to non-dilutive capital later. What are your advice to companies about when it makes sense to start thinking about raising, how much, what are the right different types of, should we be thinking about equity, should we be thinking about debt, convertible notes, and so on?
Sure. I first just want to reflect that, my goodness, if everyone can just sort of follow the model that Nick just described, that's a pretty good, I think that there's a lot of sophisticated thinking there around kind of recognizing when it's the right time and then being really strategic in the time before that. It's not uncommon for startups to be like, well, I know my big dream is going to need VC, so I'm going to start working on it now, way before, before the company is going to actually be accepted by that market. So, do that. But I also think that it is raising capital from professional investors is such a relationship exercise that I think we often, we'll talk about you have to be a scalable business and you have to eventually be able to do $100 million in annual ARR or whatever, right? There's sort of these benchmarks that we talk about. And I think at the end of the day, way before you're ready to even build the pitch deck and start talking to investors, figuring out who those people are going to be and building relationships with them not because you're going to actually raise money from them in the future, but because like talking to them 2 years or 3 years maybe before you're even ready to raise money means that you'll actually know like, oh, this fund is actively writing checks and they're looking for deals in this space. And like when they talk to a company, they're looking for these factors. You already have sort of the framework in mind so that when you talk to investors, you're actually showing up and talking to the right people at the right time. It is about relationships.
Terrific. Now let's talk about non-dilutive capital. Julia, let's hear from you. What is your advice to founders in thinking about different types of non-dilutive capital that might be options to them?
Yeah, so I would say, so this is sort of what we facilitate, right? How do we match technology solutions with opportunities for government funding? If you think about as a company saying, I want to pitch my solution to or I see this funding opportunity, I would say think about the government funder as a type of investor. Like, what would you do to prepare to pitch in front of an investor, right? That's the same kind of mentality that you need to have when you're evaluating government funding opportunities, because the people behind those decisions are also, they have expectations, right? They have requirements that they're trying to meet. They have timelines that they're trying to meet, just like an investor might have an ROI timeline, right? There's not going to be a financial necessarily, but maybe some technical outcomes. So think about really evaluating those opportunities to determine, do they align with your strategy? I'd like, I'm also with Beth on follow what Nick does, right? So we think about how in your development cycle, those non-dilutive funding opportunities can move what you're already trying to do forward and at the same time align with government requirements, so that those two things are in alignment, right? I have seen a startup company who had a good technology get very derailed because they had a technology and a market plan for one industry, and they thought this technology can get applied to this government opportunity that I see in a completely different application, and they're spending resources and a lot of things. Now, it was a great outcome for the military health at the time, but the military is not going to be able to support that business and be a large client because they didn't have the demand signal, right? So that goes back to sort of understanding your market. So I would just say when you are looking at funding opportunities, because the funding, I think this 2 or 3 people yesterday said, the government can be an amazing partner, right, in what you're trying to accomplish. Why? Because they're rooting for you. We're all rooting for you, right, to be successful when you have technologies that are going to change the world. But how do you get all those right circumstances in line so that you can achieve your objectives and then also contribute to sort of these national priorities and what the government is trying to accomplish for all of us, right? So I'll stop there, but I mean, there's a lot to unpack, yeah.
Yeah, and Julia, I think you've said something really important, which is the minute you take funding, whether it's venture funding, non-dilutive funding, you're basically bringing in a partner to your business. So thinking about the right smart money, the right partner whose objectives are aligned to your objectives as founders, it's something that's critical regardless of the type of funding that you're bringing in. Let's continue in the thread with non-dilutive capital and maybe come back to Nick on other types of non-dilutive capital besides government funding specifically. Can you talk about best practices that you've seen when companies have done this well or maybe not done it as well?
Yeah, so I think first of all, it's good to understand the options that you have. And for us, like I said before, understanding our risk profile and the people that were interested in the types of things that we were doing, it kind of limited what we were able to do. But I think the other thing, too, to consider is there's benefits of having a bit of a mixture of non-dilutive or maybe government and commercial funding. One of the things I was just thinking about is that oftentimes, if you're in an economic recession, then oftentimes that's when government funding is starting to ramp up. So there's some cyclicality, I guess, of the types of funding, and so it can be helpful if you're in a bad economic times. You can have other sources of capital that can help support your company. I think aside from that, we have had non-government, non-dilutive funding, which are typically more, they feel a bit more like services contracts. But again, if you can be careful about your IP, those can also be sources of revenue or other ways to fuel the company. But I think like you were saying, it is all about really understanding the customer, the investor, understanding what their pain points are, and seeing if there's a good fit there with your long-term ambitions and what that effort is being funded.
Terrific. Beth, anything to add from that based on your experience as an investor?
Well, actually, I would say maybe more from having run accelerator programs and built a company. I have more of an opinion on this. I think that there are ways to make money from your customers way earlier than you think, and it is easy to kind of be held back and say, but the technology isn't ready and it's not perfect yet. And the customers that need your solution the most, the early adopters, they will chase you down the street with cash for a thing that is half built and mostly broken because their problem is so acute. And get that revenue because it's going to help the company continue to fuel that R&D. But you're also learning such critically important things from those customers because they, one, believe in it, they want it to succeed. You're hearing it from the exact right people, not just some advisor that maybe built something 10 years ago, but literally the person is like, no, but I need the button to be here. Can you please put the button here? And they're giving you money to do that. So there's a really collaborative feedback loop with those early customers. You can make it perfect later.
That's terrific. So we've talked a lot about non-dilutive funding in the form of grants. Now let's talk about non-dilutive funding in the form of partnering. This fits nicely with a point that Nick made earlier about IP strategy and the right way to manage your IP. So to any of the three of you, what's the best way for companies to think about partnering?
I mean, I think, like you were saying, depending on if you're a technology company, then IP is your moat, it's your lifeblood, and so I think it's these types of decisions were when I, as an engineer, found the value of having a business person that I was working with. I thought early on as an engineer, my perfect company would be just all engineering, but there are really important business decisions, and I think I've also heard the advice that if you can't afford a good lawyer, you can't afford to be in business. There's decisions that you make very early on that can have profound impacts and really affect the overall value of your company. And I think it depends also on your preference too. For me, my company and this company was an extension of the 5 years that I put into grad school, and so I really wanted to, swing for the fences and have this be a home run or nothing. I didn't want to have a base hit, but that's not everyone's strategy. Sometimes you intentionally want to have a base hit, and it's okay to try to think about your exit strategy earlier on. But for us, IP was key to our strategy, and I think every single opportunity that we evaluated had to be looked at and scrutinized from that perspective because it was so crucial to our overall long-term strategy.
What about from either of the other two of you? How have you seen this play out in different types of businesses?
So I will say, when it comes to your resources are always limited, right? And so to look around, there are local, state, federal economic development resources that are available to you to leverage to get some of this advice, maybe seed capital type stuff that won't set valuation too early, all of those kinds of things. So don't be shy about trying to connect with whatever resources are in your area or outside of your area or from your connections here. At South by Southwest. This is what we do as ATI, so I'm going to do a shameless plug about that. It's all about collaboration for us, right? Networking, connecting people, not just connecting government to businesses, but businesses to businesses, so that outcomes can happen, right? Yes, we have a lot of non-dilutive funding opportunities for our members, but there's also tremendous value in the resources and coaching and education that you can get about how to play in different markets and how to find entry points for funding sources. So I would just, I know Nick sort of said that too, look at your individual circumstances, but also try to really look at exhausting your understanding of what resources are available to you, because you can't have too many, right? You can use most of the help that you, I'm not gonna say all help is helpful, but everyone can use all the help they can get. And I know that early in my career, I'd worked with some economic development, state economic development efforts, and there are a lot of resources out there, and if you're willing to partner and talk about how that can help work for you, I think that's one thing to do. And one of our consortia, the Medical Technology Enterprise Consortia, they offer commercialization services, to their members, so that if you need help with your regulatory path, so there's just, you don't know where those resources are until you start looking for them.
I love that perspective on intangibles and this idea that there's so much to be gained for early stage companies that is non-financial, whether it's advice, whether it's in the form of mentorship and connections and so on. And that's actually a huge part of what we do at JLABS, where we work with companies from their earliest stages to supply them with the right connectivity, the right mentorship from a pharma perspective in a non-confidential way, and other sort of non-quantifiable aspects that can affect the business down the line. Beth, let's hear from you from an incubator perspective. How have you seen those types of resources support companies?
So the organization that launched Ignite VC, which I'm now running, is called Lab Central, and it's a nonprofit incubator in Cambridge. And I just recently heard someone describe what their kind of secret sauce is, and it's sort of the AWS for drug discovery, because you can just walk in the door and start doing the science, and it doesn't require sort of the build out and the $100 million investment to get started and everything. And I mean, just the ability to move faster at the earliest stages for anyone, whether it's in the medical biotech side, or it's a physical product, or even just software, finding the places where you can tap into resources and just go and not have the spin up time is really valuable.
Interesting. So now we've talked about companies across a range of industries. Some of these industries have different types of operating models, where on the one hand, let's say biotech or tech, as Nick mentioned earlier, IP is absolutely critical. Other types of businesses, other aspects are more important to think about early on. Let's hear from each of the panelists about the different industries they've interacted with. How are they similar or different? And is there a unified set of best practices for companies across all industries, or is it really industry dependent? Beth, let's start again with you.
Sure. I've been really surprised by this, actually, with the Fluency Score, which is my data technology company. In the early days, we actually wouldn't sell into life science organizations. We could measure companies doing B2B, B2C, kind of direct to consumer, a wide range of companies, hardware, software, really all over. I was very, very confident in that. And I was like, if you have a cure for cancer, you don't have a business model problem. There is no product market fit risk if you have a cure for cancer. Don't need to be measuring that component. And in fact, I had those organizations serving those early incubators across the country saying, no, actually, even within this category, we need to be making sure that we're solving the right problem for the right people in the earliest phases. And so I think that there's more similarity than not. At the end of the day, to build a business, you have to solve a problem for a very specific group of people that are willing to pay you money. And that is the challenge in the earliest days. And so getting really, really laser focused on where you're at in recognizing which of those challenges needs to be addressed is kind of universal.
Interesting. All right, Nick, what about you?
I guess the way that I've looked at different industries is, ultimately it's not, may not seem that profound, but as a entrepreneur, when you're evaluating maybe strategic decisions or different options that you have, everything boils down to risk. And so you're really just assessing, what is the level of risk involved in this decision? And so I think when we look at different verticals, we kind of look at it from that perspective. For us, typically, there's two main categories that you could maybe think about the Venn diagram between those two categories. One of them is market risk, and the other one is technical risk. So can we solve this problem, and is there demand out there for it? When we look at different markets, and I would presume this is how maybe non-technical companies think about this too, we think about, where is there demand? How can we de-risk the business and market aspects of this? And so I would a piece of advice I would suggest for folks out there is go and do your homework, assess the different markets that you have, and really kind of understand the pain points, and listen to it and see, where are these people, knocking down my door and chasing after me, even if I don't have a complete product. That can be a really helpful, piece of advice to think about. But then, you also need to assess the risk from other perspectives. For instance, for us, we build robots, and so we need to think about, are there safety certifications that we need to get for this? Operating in the medical field has significantly higher consequences for a fault or a failure than maybe in carrying a box in a warehouse or something like that. If you drop a box, a life is not at risk. And so I think that's a major area for us is those market factors like safety certifications and other regulations are key factors as well. I think there's maybe the last piece of this was working maybe with government versus non-government. There's different factors at hand, and the stakeholders, the key decision makers are different in those different scenarios, and so understanding who really can make the funding decision for this agreement can be a little bit different in the different verticals too.
Interesting. And Julia, from your perspective?
Yeah, so good comments, I think, from the panel, because I do agree with Beth. I think there's more. Of course, I'm a business person. I'm not a technology person, scientist, and so I do think from a business perspective there are a lot of similarities. But so I agree with that. I also think that depending on the business, to Nick's point, are you going to have to be operating in a highly regulated environment? Do you need manufacturing capability? That's very different than someone who's running an IT company, right? So, or with a software solution that's not going to need safety certifications and other things. We do a lot of work with the DoD. Well, guess what? In order for you to do work with the DoD, there are things that you need to be able to say that you're able to do too, and maybe those are things that are important to you or not important to you. So there are a lot of things about core business. Who is your customer? How are they going to pay? Are they interested? Can you get in that chain somewhere? But that's true for every business out there, right? But then when each individual company is going to have their own set of circumstances that they're going to have to navigate to some of the comments that have already been made. So I think there's a combination, and what works for one, you may have said, hey, there's serial entrepreneurs, and I did this, and this worked for me one time. That doesn't mean that in a completely different industry, that same formula is going to work again. And so just to be aware of those similarities and differences, I think is important.
Interesting. So we've talked about funding, we've talked about planning for the business and product, we've talked about technical planning, we've talked about IP planning. One thing that we haven't talked about yet when it comes to building for success for the long term is team building. What are the aspects of building a great team from the beginning? Nick, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think this is probably the most important decision that you make as a founder. If you look at, I think it's true for us, I think it's probably true for most companies, the most, from a cost standpoint, the most expensive resource you're paying for is people. And so if you don't have a good team, you're not really setting yourself up for success. I guess a quick anecdote, in grad school, I never planned to be an entrepreneur. I kind of stumbled into it through, applying for SBIRs and kind of, getting more and more into commercialization. But I didn't have, I went to school here in Austin at University of Texas, and we were not known as a big robotics school when I was there. I could have gone to East Coast or West Coast, but I found myself here, and I was not armed with this, superstar set of peers that I was just going to go and cajole into joining my company. So back then, 10 years ago, I had no even idea that building a company like what we have would even be possible. But there was one or two people that we started off with that have been through us, been with us throughout the entire journey, and those, kind of key individuals were crucial to our success. That kind of is in the category of founders or people who are so committed to the company. Maybe they have a lot of equity in the company, maybe not. Maybe they just believe in the vision. But those people are the most valuable resources I think you can have. Those people are also the few people that can share the stress and burden that is inevitable with most companies. I mean, most startups die, and the ones that survive probably come very close to death at some point. So even just the emotional support, my wife is very supportive, but she's not, exposed maybe to all the challenging decisions and risks that we see. So I think those core founding members have been very critical for us. Beyond that, you get to a point where you start, at least for us, we weren't serial entrepreneurs. We did this kind of for the first time, sort of out of our garage in a sense. And at some point we thought, we need to probably hire some people that have done this before, and that have, as one of our advisors says, who's been in this movie before, they kind of, can react to patterns that they've experienced before. And we looked for people that had a lot of proven track records, like, I need to go build a manufacturing line. Can I go find someone that has done that? And with those people, sort of maybe at the C-suite level or the leaders of the company, in my mind, it's a binary thing. I would not skimp on those people. You do not want to go and try to go in the bargain bin to find those leaders. Regardless of how much equity or salary that they cost, they will be the differentiators between success and failure. So you can claim however much equity you want of a failing company, but if it's not successful, it will be a big slice of a zero-sum pie.
Very well said. Beth, what about from your perspective?
Yeah, the first thing that came to mind when you said team was trust. It's like, especially in the that core early team, like the ability to build a high trust, highly transparent, high velocity team is how you can kind of overcome a lot of the initial kind of iteration and building a startup isn't a straight line. There's no straight line in innovation. Like it's this winding circle. And so there's gotta be a way for the team to be able to communicate really, really well with a high degree of trust to get through kind of all those dead ends and pivots.
Terrific. And Julia, what about from your perspective?
So can I just say amen? I think, after you're through some of the initial risk mitigation, if you're wanting your business to scale, it comes down to management experience, right? It really, really does come down to leadership, and I'm with Nick. Don't skimp on that, because those folks are the ones that are going to take you through it, and that's what investors are looking at too, right? What are the qualifications of the team that's going to bring this solution to market, and do they have the wherewithal to lead and to take us to the next level? So I do think I'm with you on the management experience, and the qualifications of that management team is going to be critical long term.
So from a team perspective, we've heard about hiring high quality people, the right people with the right skill set. We've heard about building culture and building trust. I would add a couple of points to this discussion. One around thinking about the timing of the people you hire. So I talk with a lot of startups about when is the right time, especially for technical founders, to bring in a CEO. When is the right time to bring in a chief business officer who has experience with fundraising? And there's not one right way to do this. This is going to be different for every company. But I would say a level of intentionality and honesty with yourselves as founders about your skill set and the skill sets that you need at a given point in your development is critical. Another area where I've seen companies make decisions in their early days that have led to, let's say, headaches down the line is in thinking about their leveling as they're bringing in new members of their team. They're doing that first, second, third wave of hiring. Hopefully these are folks that are going to be with you for the long haul and thinking about what your company is going to look like from an org structure down the line. So in a couple of minutes, we're going to shift to questions from the audience. So I'm going to ask folks who have questions to begin queuing at the mics, and we'll open it up to the group. But one final question before we do that. So taking a step back, this is my first year at South by Southwest. Do we have any other first-timers in the audience? Awesome. That's terrific. One of the things that has struck me in the last couple of days about South by Southwest has been the interdisciplinary aspect. This idea that not only can good ideas come from anywhere, but good ideas come from the boundaries between disciplines and the intersections between disciplines. So I'm going to take a step back to my background, which is my academic training as a mathematical and computational biologist. And mathematical and computational biologists love nothing more than to put letters and numbers to a phenomenon and then give it a catchy, quippy name, usually derived from a great work of literature. So is anybody in the audience familiar with the Anna Karenina principle? Any statisticians or Russian literature experts in the audience? No. All right. The beginning of Anna Karenina goes something like this. All happy families are alike in their happiness, and all unhappy families are unhappy in their own unique way. And so if you sit on that for a moment, what that basically means is there are a set of necessary conditions that all have to be met to get to success. So a failure of any one of these conditions leads to unhappiness or failure. But conversely, there are as many ways to fail as there are conditions, so an almost infinite combination of ways to fail. So far, if we think about for building for success, up to now, we've made an Anna Karenina list of things that companies need to do in order to be successful. They need to get their funding strategy right, they need to get their business and product strategy right, they need to get their IP strategy right, they need to get their team right. What else should we add to the Anna Karenina list for early stage companies? Beth, let's start with you.
Oh man, that was quite a lead up. I don't know. You said you were going to throw a curveball. Well done.
I did. All right.
I think that the answer to this is really depressing, unfortunately. It's the one I hate the most, and I think about it a lot. So I live in the world of wanting to figure out how can we rationalize this work? How can we de-risk this work? How can we work on the right things at the right time, be focused, be disciplined, all those things, right? And I think that we have a lot of areas of control in this. And at the end of the day, so much of success has to do with timing. And there is an element of luck in this kind of space that we're in. And so, I mean, there might be right answers. Some of the sessions at this conference that I'm the most excited about are the ones where it's people talking about how to think like a futurist and how to start to envision future outcomes and things like that. Because I think there's a lot we can do to imagine how we can build for the future we want to see. But man, timing is one of those components in the Anna Karenina model that we have to really keep an eye out for.
I completely agree with you. Nick, is there anything else you'd put on the Anna Karenina list?
I don't know. I was thinking back to the comments about incubation and advisors, and I guess maybe the thought I would leave this group with is no one can look into a crystal ball and tell you the decisions that you need to make today to be successful tomorrow. I think there are people that have been in similar situations before, and they can give you maybe some sage advice. There might be less critical decisions that are obvious decisions to make, but I agree, timing is really important, and you can't anticipate when that's going to happen. So I would say, listen to advice you get from others, surround yourself with people that have experience, but then be passionate about what you're doing. And if you think you'll be successful, that's probably the most important factor to success.
Passion, I love it. Essential ingredient for success. All right, Julia, final comments before we open
So
it up.
yeah, I'm thinking about what can I add to what's already been said, and I would thinking about seeing successful companies and the entrepreneurs that talk about, I had this one chance meeting. I was thinking about your timing comment, right? I met this person at a conference and they introduced me to this person and it made all the difference, right? So folks that are entrepreneur are already courageous, right? You're already out there doing things and believing in yourself, which is huge. But also value the connections that you can make, right? There is exponential value in a network, right? And if you can surround yourself and meet folks and they can be thinking about you, right? They can be excited with you. You build champions. I think someone yesterday said, you know, it changed everything when I had this champion and people believed in that champion and they believed in me, right? So don't dismiss the value of networking and just meeting people, because you might meet someone today and it doesn't mean anything, right? They were fun to talk to and it was interesting and we had an interesting conversation, and then 2 years later, their business, something has changed and they remembered you and maybe you can help them and that connection gets made. So just because something doesn't happen immediately doesn't mean that there's not value in building a network and having those connections that you can sort of draw on, almost like a bank account, you know, for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Building for the future. You don't know when somebody you meet today is going to be the one who helps you with a problem down the line. Yep. Let's open it up for questions. Do we have any questions from the audience? All right, please go ahead.
Hi, thanks for taking out the time to do this today. Wonderful panel. Beth and Nick, I suppose this question is for you. To give some context, my name is Deval. I'm the founder of a company called Lotus. For people with disabilities, we make a ring that controls objects at home by pointing. In essence, we build hardware. My question is, what is the best way to gauge product market fit before launch? We're about 6 months away from launch. What are some signals that are good indicators of product market fit, or what are the best ways to gauge that pre-launch?
Have you tried selling that idea with some pre-sales?
Yeah, so the way we're doing it right now is using our prototypes,
Yep.
alphas and betas, to go about talking to sort of who we believe our go-to-market strategy fits with. But I don't know if that's the best way, if there are other indicators.
Great. When people give you money, that is the signal.
Pre-launch.
Absolutely. When I launched the Fluency Score, I had the idea. I pre-sold the first contract 6 months before I wrote any code. I actually didn't know what the code. I didn't even know how we were going to approach solving the problem. I just knew the problem needed to be solved, and I found a customer willing to put money down, and then I started like actually building something. And so I'm very opposed to free trials in the earliest days, because they can be such a signal of people wanting to be supportive, but not necessarily a signal that they need the thing you're proposing or that it solves that problem. So being able to say, hey, I think we can solve this. Do you want to be one of our first customers? We're taking pre-orders. You can always refund that money if like something doesn't go the way it needs to, or it doesn't solve the problem. You can be an honest, a business person in this process, but you're learning the most through that interaction and in that conversation.
Got it. Thank you. I'm actually curious from Nick, from a hardware perspective.
Yeah.
I mean, demand is what you want to find, and so I think sales and that's a great way to prove that there's demand there. But yeah, I think for us, we try to do pilots. We do more B2B work versus B2C work, and so we can understand the customer's needs and what thresholds of costs they're willing to support. But yeah, I would agree with Beth. If you can get someone to pay for it, they value your product more than they value their own money. Like, that's a great indicator.
Thank you very much.
Terrific. We've got quite the queue going. Let's have the next question.
Hi, my name is Sam. So I come from a different type of highly regulatory, industry. I come from aesthetics, so think injectables, neuromodulators, medical devices, right? So every so often there is some technology that's thrust into the aesthetics world that is not DTC. It's B2B to DTC, so it's physician dispensed. And they're not trying to solve a problem. They're just trying to say, I've been working on this for 10 years. I want to be the next big thing. So separate from Deb's question, I have technology in my background that got thrust into the market. It's been purchased, but it is flailing in the market. Like, nobody knows how to use it. Nobody knows how to recommend it to patients, so on and so forth. So my question is, all of the other portions of the Anna Karina situation is checked, but it's in the market, it's dying. When do you know when to pull back and say, this needs to come out and this needs to be reworked? And how do you deal with the egos that will not accept that? Fun question.
And we're all looking at each other.
I mean, I feel like you guys have probably experienced that more than 40 times in your life.
There's probably a lot to unpack in that scenario. I think that's where like my like sigh is like, oh, I want to ask you like 5 more follow-ups. So it's like
I have time.
tricky to manage in this process. But the ego piece is the one that really caught my attention, because I think in this work, especially when if we're innovating, if we're trying to bring something and solve a problem, like there's really not a place for ego in this work. Like we're either solving a problem and helping customers and they want it, or we're not, and we have to bring some curiosity and some humility to that work and say, we don't know all the answers. It's when we're interacting with our customers that we learn from them. We're not right, they're right. How can we learn from them and then adjust to meet those needs? And so I don't know the scenario there, but that's the one that caught my attention as maybe like a crunch point in what you're dealing with.
Yeah, the other thing that I would say about that, just piling on to that, is there a market? What I heard you say is they don't know what to, the physicians don't know how to prescribe it, they don't know what to do with it, they don't know how to use it. And so how much work went into all the things I talked about earlier about where do we fit in the market, and is there a market, is there customer demand for it, is there a signal there? And then you just kind of have to be honest with yourself, to Beth's point about let's evaluate this and see, is this really the right pathway? Is there something else that can be done? Or I don't want to say pull the plug, but I mean, sometimes those decisions have to be made. You just have to you have to pivot and say this is not working and it's unlikely to work in the near term, right?
Thank you. All right, next question.
Hi, my name's Alex. I'm the founder of a company called Calabria. We're building the ChatGPT for helping students and teachers in the classroom. And my question is sort of about kind of following off of some of the stuff that you were talking about, but the wrinkle where I see sort of a separation in my experience and the things you guys were talking about was how you sort of handle these things when the comparables and the types of sort of products that are out there in the market are still evolving. You know, this category of AI tutor or teaching assistant, I think we kind of all agree that it's going to happen maybe, but like, you know, it's not done yet, right? And specifically, how do you think about going from kind of that early stage, which is where I'm at now, to thinking about like moving into that business strategy and that really next level when, like, for example, you can't hire somebody who has that direct experience, kind of like what you guys are talking about. Yeah.
I would say, you know, start by making sure that you're understanding the market well, you understand what the opportunities are there. For us, you know, we've got a massive engineering team, and one of our most important functions at our company is our product department, because our product department like points that huge resource at a certain direction. So you might look at making sure you really have a good product lead or that kind of function at your on your team. That could be a really helpful resource to kind of make sure you're pointing it the right direction and assembling the right resources to solve it.
Thank you. And we've got one final question.
Hi, I'm here with your second EdTech question. My name is Amrina, and I'm building a company called EdBetter, and we're building an instructional coaching platform for K-12 classrooms. So this would be an in-classroom tool with a focus on foundational mathematics and early literacy. I believe it was you, Beth, you talked a little bit about the need to differentiate between whether you're a product company or a service company. And in the world that I am trying to build for, yes, we want to get the technology and the product right, but what we know, I've been in a civil servant for 20 years, what I know about my industry is adoption of that product and use of that product is king. And we're asking heavily overburdened teachers and instructional coaches to use our product. As such, we, in our company, we're putting a lot of focus on product support and increasing adoption. So we know that without the hand-holding, our users will really struggle. So could you speak a little bit about the intersection of product and service in a business where that interdependency can really be make or break?
Was that for me? I think Nick was the one that was
talking
about product
right.
and service.
Okay.
I don't know if you had any thoughts.
I think that actually might have been me, but happy to put it to the two of you first. I'd be
I'm
thoughts.
happy to hear what you have to say. Yeah.
I mean, I think you just need to be intentional about, what is your business model, and like for us, there's a very big difference between being a service-oriented company versus being a product-oriented company. I think, you just think about like what is a repeatable process that you can operate over again and again to create a value for the company. That's sort of how we evaluated those two different trade-offs for us.
So, and I would add to that too, just to go back to what we talked about earlier, which is understand your customer, right? So if you have a product that you can sell to somebody, but they don't know how to use it without your services, right? So think about that combination, and then will they pay for services to make it a meaningful product buy, right, and product adoption. So I think there is a balance to be struck, and part of that is understanding what your customer pain points are and the value proposition that you're proposing, whether that's a product or a service.
A common thread here really seems to be intentionality and customer focus. Lots of ways to build a great product business, a great service business, something in the middle. The key is understanding what you're trying to do and sticking to your North Star. One final question.
Hi. Great panel. Really enjoyed it. A lot of things resonates with what we're doing, building our company. And one thing that really stuck with me was the topic of trust in the core team. So we're blessed with having a really strong founding team with experts within their domains. We're serial entrepreneurs, we've done a lot of times. And we're doing quite well. Like, we've grown quickly, we're making money before the product even having been launched, so super happy about that. However, we're a distributed team, so we're in different countries, most of us. And we have we have a lot of people in the team that, trust have to be earned. And it's quite hard building trust when you're not in the same physical location. You're working with different types of challenges, just a lot of stress. So do you have any ideas on how do you build trust in distributed teams with high velocity, a lot of focus on merit, so social factors not super strong?
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
I'll jump all over that. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. So I built Fluent I started Fluent in 2018, fully remote from the beginning, before it was pandemic cool. And I think that the key for us in doing that was just having rituals in the way that the team gathered throughout the day or throughout the week, a cadence for that was primarily focused on two things: transparency around the work that's being done, especially if you're like fully distributed. Like, you don't know what anyone on the team is doing, and you won't know until they show up with like having completed something. So like building in like more communication than you think is reasonable around what are people doing and what help they need and where their roadblocks are. A lot of this is just the rituals that come from Agile and Scrum, which can be applied to like workflows way outside of just building a software product. But then the other component from Scrum that I think is maybe even more important for building trust and culture is the retrospective and having a really consistent cadence. So like, even if you don't do stand-ups, even if you don't have like a Scrum board and kind of do sort of like the formal rituals that come from Agile, if there is every 2 weeks, the team gets together and talks about what worked, what didn't work, and what you could try around how the team operates, not about the actual product or the like technology or whatever, but literally like, what's working about how we're talking and working and collaborating and how we're tackling these problems. What could we try next around those things? Transformative for how the team tackles hard things and is capable of kind of managing the stress and the uncertainty that come with any innovation.
A great parting piece of advice, trust and rituals. Since we are at time, I want to put a final question to the other two panelists for their parting pieces of advice. Nick and Julia, one piece of advice for companies looking to build for growth.
I mean, I'm just thinking of your last point. Trust is really important, and do whatever you have to do to get there. Whether that's, traveling and being in person, once a year or twice a year, something like that. But yeah, I think trust is a big part of it.
And Julia?
So, ATI is a collaboration company, so I would just reiterate the comment that I made earlier, which do not underestimate the value of a network and those that you surround yourself with. We talked about that as the importance of the management team. All of those things are important because at the end of the day, people run businesses, right? They don't run themselves.
Trust, collaboration, and people. On that note, thank you so much to our panelists for the discussion today. Thank you to South by Southwest and ATI, and to all of you for being a great audience. That was mystery that I found.